Okay, so let's get into this deep dive. We've got a really interesting set of sources here. They're all centered around one person's, well, their life journey, really.
Yeah, it's quite personal. It weaves together their writing, spirituality, some experiences they call paranormal.
Right, and a very specific viewpoint on, the forces they think are shaping things.
Exactly. So our mission here, basically, is to unpack all that, pull out the core ideas, especially about reality, different ways of seeing it, power dynamics.
But sticking strictly to what's in the material provided, no adding our own spin, just presenting the source's perspective.
Absolutely. And what jumps out right away is how it connects the personal, like daily habits, even meditation, to these much bigger external forces.
Totally. It suggests that what happens inside us, our internal state, is somehow linked to these unseen influences on society.
The source really emphasizes habits, doesn't it? Daily writing, for instance, sees it as fundamental, growing alongside their spiritual practice.
Yeah, it frames creativity, particularly art, not just as expression, but as a way to actively bring what it calls divine energy into the world.
Which is set up as direct contrast to this other force, this negative influence it talks about.
Right, a force it claims prefers destruction, mockery, manifesting through things like sacrifice or even malevolent transhumanism in its view.
And that leads straight into a core claim,
Mhm.
the reality of, well, what it calls the demonic world, negative principalities, and their human agents supposedly working within institutions.
It's a strong claim, and it views things like psychiatric meds or counseling not really as therapy.
No, more like tools, instruments, it says, from the 20th century designed to pollute consciousness, to weaken the barriers against these negative incursions it describes.
And it's got some really sharp critiques of modern thinking, too, especially the idea of victimhood.
Oh, definitely. Pushes back hard on that. Explicitly says anyone claiming victim status is, well, the source uses strong words, idiot or deceiver.
Because of its belief that life experiences, even the hard ones, are actually choices made before we're born.
Exactly. It even calls a lot of modern literature victim impact statements. And atheism gets similar treatment.
Calls it the highest declaration of ignorance, essentially implying it's a kind of willful blindness to what it sees as, basic spiritual truths.
So, building on that framework of unseen forces, the source lays out these three main schools of consciousness operating globally.
Right. You've got the Western Abrahamic system focused on God, then the Eastern systems more about internal development, meditation.
And then this third one, the source calls it a gray zone.
This is where it gets really provocative, based purely on the source material, of course. Describes this third school as pure power, the antipode of love.
And it explicitly links this school, as the source interprets them, to historical groups, Freemasons, Rosicrucians.
Martinists, too. And the really striking claim is that this school has, deeply infiltrated modern institutions.
Not just the obvious ones like finance or politics, but science, intelligence agencies, even space exploration, according to the source.
Yeah, claiming the school has open contact with ET races for, well, disturbing purposes like commerce involving slavery. Again, strictly the source's claim here.
And maybe the most extreme assertion about this third school is its supposed goal, massive depopulation, eradicating human freedom.
It connects this alleged force to a whole range of things you might not normally link. Collapsing currencies, certain political trends it calls, mad flights of liberalism, free trade deals.
Big institutions like the IMF, World Bank,
Right.
even specific medical tech like mRNA vaccines, all presented by the source as tools of this agenda.
And how this school operates. The source claims initiation involves rituals that consecrate the forfeiture of humanity.
Allowing participants, in its view, to do dark things without being destroyed themselves. The author even describes their own intense experience in a dark world while writing.
As a kind of initiation into understanding this power, though it clarifies the darkness itself doesn't endorse negative human actions.
And looping back to creativity, the source describes writing the books as almost like a lightning rod for paranormal activity. Intense stuff.
Suggesting that digging into these topics, the act of creation itself, can open unseen doors requiring, well, supernatural help to handle. It mentions getting help like a ball of white light.
So wrapping this up, what does it all mean for you, the listener, based on these sources.
Well, this deep dive presents a world possibly driven by hidden forces, these distinct schools operating behind the scenes. It challenges, standard ideas about power, reality, history.
It suggests things you might see as separate personal spirituality, global politics, tech advancements could actually be interconnected through these less visible dynamics from the source's perspective.
It's really an invitation based purely on this material to look beyond the surface, to consider alternative, though definitely unconventional, frameworks.
So given these concepts, especially this idea of different consciousness schools operating,
What parts of the world are...
Wow. I think that's pretty cool. Just let me get my volume up here. I wasn't really at this computer. Oh, wow, that's way down. There we go. Hey, how you doing, folks? I'm Bruce McDonald, and this is the Talamanca Review. It's 10:47 p.m., Sunday the 8th of June, and I took a couple days off. I get a little juiced, a little busy in June and December, but June specifically. And yeah, so here I am. And tonight, I'm not going to really go for another reality of imagination tonight. I'm going to take a little break. And let me begin by introducing that clip that you just heard. So that is an AI-generated audio overview of the chapter called Three Schools, Three Books, Three Schools. In The Devil in Us, which Crystal just finished. I got your message, Crystal. Thank you very much. By the way, I love hearing from readers. Let me know what you think of any of the books that you finish. It's one of the great joys of being a writer, at least a writer of my stature, meaning I don't have millions of readers like a Stephen King or a J.K. Rowling, so I actually enjoy interacting with my readers and hearing what they have to say. Also very much because of the content of the books as well. And that's an AI service I pay for called Gemini. And it's the Google AI. And I'm pretty happy with it. It's about, I think, $24.99 US a month. And so yeah, it comes in handy with work and with a number of small tasks here and there. So I don't see the AI as being that frightening or disturbing. But that is not in a sense, but literally tonight's podcast, Three Schools. Okay? And this is what the last 5 or 6 years have taught me. Is this, I guess we'll call it a third school of consciousness. Now, traditionally, we have two approaches to the religious or the spiritual understanding of life. We have the East and we have the West. And some things about the systems are the same, and some things are different. One of the things that jumps out for me right at the outset is the relationship of religion to society. In the East, spiritual figures have come and gone every century, every generation really. And they exist very naturally, tangential to, or alongside society. They have no real influence on the governing of society, nor, to the best of my understanding, but I could be wrong, has there ever been theocratic government in the East. The Eastern systems have always been systems of initiation and practice for personal development, personal illumination, personal enlightenment, personal transcendence. In the midst of societies that continue on in a very similar way, century after century, until the 20th century, at least with India and with China. And those are the two great societies of the East, two most populous societies of the East. Both very good at medicine, which explains the very high populations, their ability to keep people alive. And this is where in the East we get yoga, which is a solitary practice after initiation. If you're relatively fortunate, you'll spend a lot of time with your instructor, your guru, and you'll unfold under the supervision of the guru. Very many Hindu paths of internal cultivation similar to this. In China, you have Buddhism, which also comes from India. Very much the Buddhist monasteries have always existed alongside the governing institutions, not in collaboration or antipathy, just coexisting. Same thing with the Taoist schools, just coexisting with the society. And here I'm speaking, about the last 1,000 years or so, or whatever we can know about the last 1,000 years. Nothing is really certain. Let's come over to the West now. We have basically one system, and it's the Jewish system, and I think it's only fair to acknowledge that. The entire system of religious thought in the West is Jewish. And I say that as a compliment to the Jewish people. There may have been certain secret societies or mystery schools in ancient Greece, no doubt. Ancient Rome, no doubt. Ancient Egypt, no doubt. And then the pre-Hebraic societies of Sumeria and Babylon. Ancient Persia, which some people say is the origin of all power on the planet now, that all of the families go back to ancient Persia. I don't know if that's true. Just thought I'd mention it because it popped into my head. So in the West we have a Jewish system, and the Jewish system has always aligned itself with governance. It's a very interesting thing to note, okay? Because the Eastern system is an individual decision. The society doesn't necessarily follow the edicts of a particular spiritual path in the East. The Chinese government, obviously the communist government of today, sits completely juxtaposed to all native religious and spiritual practice in China. And in India, Modi's government, although Modi himself is something of a contemplative, he spent 2 years in the Himalayas as a wandering contemplative. Not many people know that. But his government in New Delhi sits completely juxtaposed to the goings-on of the spiritual schools. They may have some influence or some effect upon government out of respect, meaning that the Prime Minister would have respect for the traditions and try and bring some of the balance and sensibility of these spiritual traditions into the governance of the country. Simple wisdom. But not quite the same thing as the West. The West is a whole other animal when it comes to government and theology. Now, the ancient Jews were a completely religious society. Now, I suppose religions were quite more front and center back then in that part of the world. Of course, in the true West, which is us in the Americas, before colonization, there was nothing but shamanism here. And some, let's say, ritual-based sacrifice religions in the form of the Aztecs. There were some very interesting things going on here. I do not think we're being told the truth about the Americas. Yeah, not too surprising to hear Bruce McDonald say we're not being told the truth, right? But it's true. Why not say it? Bit of an ironic sentence, right? It's true to say we're not being told the truth. A little bit of the ironic mirror there in one sentence. So in ancient Israel, the king was generally accepted to be the spokesperson of God. I suppose this was true of all monarchies, but really it came off of Christianity. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself. So you've got King Solomon. We don't know much about, I don't know who preceded King Solomon, or how the Israelites came to be a people under Solomon in 1000 BC, or how many prophets they'd had at that point. A bit of a mystery. And there's more king. What other kings do we know? We know King David. We know King Herod from the time of Christ. So Israel was still a nation state, a theology governed by rabbis and a king. But for us in the West, it all begins with the Jews. And there's a reason for this. Why we don't have really what I would call a proliferation of religious expression in the West. We have a little bit more in the 20th century. We've imported a lot of things. There's a lot of Western Buddhists now. There's a lot of people like me that are contemplatives. Practice the art of meditation. But that's a relatively new phenomenon. I think it really began in the 20th century when the yogis started visiting. I think the first Swami to visit the United States was in 1905, and he spent a lot of time with Nikola Tesla. I forget his name. Swami Pramathiba, maybe? I can't remember. Don't quote me on that. But Tesla found him fascinating, and he found Tesla fascinating, and they became the best of friends. The first Swami to visit the United States. Isn't that interesting that this suppressed scientific figure whose inventions could have transformed the world, not least of all our society because he was in the West, ends up being completely syncopatic with the first Swami to visit the United States in 1905. And this would have been at the time of steamship travel. Now, in the East, there's also been a relative proliferation of religions. I mean, it's the only part of the world that still gets bona fide new religions. Okay, like, so even Sikhism is only about 500 years old. And believe me when I tell you, it's a bona fide religion. It had 10 masters. They had a very unique message. Very practical, very modern. So there's an example of India getting a new religion, and this was before the British occupation. Sikhism started about 500 years ago. And when I say it's a legitimate religion, I mean that it springs off of nothing preceding it. It comes out of nowhere. You really, really should take a look at Sikhism. You got Jainism, Buddhism comes from there. Siddhartha. You've got the old Hindu religions go way back. And really in the East, it's always been about the practice, the practice, the practice. Whereas in the West, it's about conformity, to say, I belong to this belief system, but there's really no demonstration of it. You know, there's no demonstration of it. There's no demonstration of wisdom. There's no demonstration of light. There's no demonstration of insight. There's no gradation to the system. There's a series of sacraments. That's what we call them in Catholicism, a series of sacraments. So you got and they carry over to most of the Protestant religions. You have baptism. Right? Now there's more sacraments in Catholicism. You got baptism, you've got first confession, first communion, confirmation. Marriage is a sacrament in the Catholic Church. It's woven right into our system of government too. And again, this is also an extension of the original Jewish root. Now, Judaism is probably one of the most aggressive religions in the world. Yeah, if not the most aggressive religion in the world. In fact, it is the most aggressive religion in the world. Aggressive meaning a complete and total intolerance for people who do not conform to it. Well, you may be saying to yourself, well, Bruce, there's only 15 million Jews in the world, which leaves another 7,985,000,000 people who are not Jews, and you're saying the Jews have no tolerance for any expression or worship of a God other than theirs. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. You just can't see it quite yet. It's woven into the 20th century with hundreds of millions of deaths. Now it's important to note and stop being coy. I will stop being coy. It's important to note that when I say Judaism, I also mean Christianity and Islam. Because there would be no Christianity without the underpinnings of the Jewish prophetic system declaring Christ to be who the Christians believe Christ said he was. Nor would there be any Islam without all of the preceding prophets, including Christ. They literally can't exist in a vacuum. And I think this is one of the reasons they hate Jews so much. Now, I think the whole system is pretty much nonsensical and an anti-spiritual system. And the whole thing is a system of mind control. And yet, I've said numerous times on the Talamanca Review that I've met illuminated Torah Jews, illuminated Christians, Catholics, and illuminated Muslims. And that's because illumination can happen to anybody. It doesn't matter what culture or what religion you practice. The first illuminated being, illuminated means touched by God. Touched by the Creator. The individual human consciousness, the ego construct, is dissolved in the internal presence of the divine, which is the highest expression of awakened imagination. In fact, transcends awakened imagination. But I'll leave that alone for now, because I'm going to get back to that when I resume the Reality of Imagination series, which might go 2, maybe 3 more podcasts. But I wanted to do this one-off tonight called Three Schools, because it's a very interesting topic. So no Jews, no Christians, and no Jews, no Muslims. So they're all Jews. If they can't exist without Jews, they are Jews. I don't know why people have such a difficulty admitting that. I mean, what is the big problem there? I don't get it. You're Jews. You're Jesus Jews, or you're Muhammad Jews, or you're Abraham Jews. You're all Jews. It's Jews. You're Jews. Now, because of the books I've written, I've had occasion to meet many people who have fallen prey to various other forms of what I would call religious fantasy or spiritual delusion. And these are those most unfortunate souls who think they've been alighted somehow because they can communicate with some decrepit extraterrestrial race. Telepathic communication, of course. It's rarely face-to-face, although it was with John Edmonds. He didn't have much to say about them. He didn't put them on a pedestal. Very interesting, isn't it? He said they didn't think much of us. He said that they thought the human race was like a dog at the side of the road. That's how they felt about us. You know how you're driving in some third world country like India, or it happens here in Central America, you just see a mangy dog that clearly has no home at the side of the road going through garbage and stuff. That's how the extraterrestrials see the human race, according to John Edmonds. And there's all these ET people now. You know, the ETs are going to save us. And I put this squarely at the feet of fucking morons like Billy Meyer and Alex Collier. And the reason those dissertations are so dangerous is they're pure information without any practice. So you become seduced with an information narrative, but they don't give you any way to transform yourself. Although Billy Meyer does say take initiation and learn how to meditate. He's been saying that for decades in his defense. Alex Collier, he doesn't say anything like that. Right? And there's other people too. And let's be honest, the Abrahamic system is purely reptilian now, pretty much. It's all ritual and cutting heads off, isn't it? It's about to explode now like a bonfire somebody threw a liter of gasoline on. Can you just feel it in the air now with those crazy fucking Sanhedrin rabbis in Israel? I swear to God, they want to burn the world down. They must have the deepest underground base on the planet. And believe it or not, I haven't even really gotten to the point of tonight's podcast, which is the third school. So the first two are the East and the West. The East is kind of in shambles now, too, if I'm being honest. That Sadhguru is a fucking goof. He's a goof. I don't mind saying that. Most of these public-facing spiritual leaders were telling people to take the fucking vaccine. You know? You couldn't get initiated or ordained into a Buddhist monastery unless you got the vaccine in 2021. You believe that shit? These people are supposed to be enlightened? What is the value of enlightenment if they're that fucking stupid? You got to wonder, you know? You really got to wonder about what's going on this planet. Now, what the last 6 years made me aware of, up until about 6 years ago, I was very well versed in both the East and the West. The culture of prayer and fasting, which comes from the West, and which is beneficial, by the way, irregardless of how crappy the scriptures are, and how crappy the rabbis, the priests, and the imams are. Doesn't matter. The prayer and the fasting is beneficial. Meditation's better, but prayer is a good starting point when you're beginning to work with your consciousness in the attempt to awaken your imagination. Yeah, the Eastern system's pretty off track now too. India's way off track. If you ever go there, you'll be lucky to escape a 3-week vacation without getting some kind of skin disease or stomach ailment. It's such a filthy and sick place now, India. It's disgusting. It's a cesspool. It's an open sewer. Okay? How can you call yourself an enlightened people when you live that way? Like an open sewer. It's a shithole. I'd like to visit Bhutan. That's a place I'd like to visit. That's a purely theocratic state as well. It's Buddhist run. What happened in the last 6 years is I got introduced to what I would call a third school of consciousness, one that I didn't really know existed. Not to the degree that I know it exists now. And quite frankly, the degree to which it knows I exist now. Because you can't know it without it knowing you, the third school. So it is like the unmanifest surveillance state from the fourth dimension is what it is. And it's real. And this is government consciousness. This is government religion. This is government control of consciousness, you know. I'll say this about the Eastern systems. The true practitioners could liberate themselves from the nonsense of their time and their culture and their people. And they could transcend and they could go up. And they could become illuminated. And if they were smart, they'd keep quiet. Maybe take on a few students and try and help a few people. But the moment you try to discuss things publicly, you're generally going to draw down trouble on yourself because this earth is controlled by profoundly negative forces and it doesn't want any consciousness freedom fighters. So the third school is the school that begins when science and the secret societies meet, which I think was sometime in the 30s, but let's say for the sake of clarity and consistency that it started in 1947. And there's a lot of things that go into this third school. A lot of mind control, a lot of trauma, a lot of natal Is it natal, prenatal, natal? What does natal mean? Is that when you're a little baby? Hang on a sec. Let me just look that up. I can't believe I don't know a word here. What are you going to do? Let me just look this up quickly. Come on, man. Natal definition. Relating to the place or time of one's birth. Yeah. I can't even remember what I was going to say, why I was looking natal up. It couldn't have been that important if I can't even remember it, right? Yeah, I remember now. So it's sexual abuse from the natal point of birth. Okay? And trauma. And it's to affect, cultivate, or mold a certain kind of consciousness. And they've been doing it for centuries in secret societies, but it really came out into the public and into the utility of I have to be careful about my wording here. I can't really say they're official government agencies. I mean, Eisenhower set up Majestic 12, and the MK Ultra program was conducted under the auspices of the CIA, first displaced to Canada, by the way. McGill University under Dr. Ewan Cameron. You know, it's all based on abuse and fracturing the mind and trying to unify or distort the relationship between the left and the right hemisphere. And it has evolved. And there's hybridization as well, begins with Cynthia Crawford, right? So this is all part of what I would call the third school. And, you know, it's become a very popular topic now, this third school. All the big podcasters are talking about it. All the big million subscriber podcasts, this is what they talk about now. That and ayahuasca, which is also part of the third school, which is the resurrection of shamanism, right? The original Western religion, the original religion of the Americas was shamanism. And that was a plant medicine, very chemical. Not a whole lot of transcendent consciousness in the shamanic tradition. Not much at all. So this third school is really probably the least spoken about system of religious practice. And I call it a religious practice because religious practice or religious belief or spiritual practice or spiritual belief all pivot off of consciousness, and the third school is all about consciousness. The difference being it's not really a belief system because its results are relatively consistent. And if the results don't manifest, probably the consequence is death. So they killed a lot of people developing these systems. So they're not really rooted in a sanctity for life, which is antithetical to both the Eastern and Western systems of governance in spiritual matters, right? The cardinal rule of all spiritual teachings in the East and the West is that life is sacred. It's sacramental, and it is to be respected and not to be taken away. Okay? That a person has a right to their breath and their life. You know, the fundamental tenet of both religions in the East and the West is thou shalt not kill. By the way, that originally means thou shalt not kill in the universal. It means vegetarianism. They don't tell you that, but that's the truth. And that applies to the Ten Commandments as well. Thou shalt not kill is, if they meant thou shalt not kill human beings, they would have said thou shalt not murder. Okay? It says thou shalt not kill. To kill is to take life, and that means any life. The foundation of all spiritual and religious teachings on this planet are vegetarian. I'm not going all wacky on you here. I'm not going to do a big vegan bullshit speech here. You like your meat, eat your meat. I'm just telling you what I'm telling you. And it's the truth. Now, this third school, they don't give a shit about any of that stuff. They're only concerned with results, man. It's like capitalism meets religion. Results for the elect few, for the pharaohs. And this is, again, it's mind control, it's genetic tampering, it's in some respects demonology and the hybridization of consciousness not from inception like Cynthia Crawford in the hybrids, but consciousness hybridization can take place in a mature adult. That, by the way, that's the thinking man's term for possession or cohabitation of a body, right? And a lot of what we call hybridization now is cohabitation. You meet my secret friend, Wilbur. He's from the planet Nabubla, and he's going to help me. He's going to help guide me through my human life. And he's real psychic, and he loans me his psychic abilities. A significant portion of the human race has already been hybridized. Already been hybridized. Now, I suppose you could say, as some people out there say, like our good friend Carrie Cassidy, who's been walking her side of the street for a couple decades now, we're all hybrids, especially us in the West, right? Especially white people. We're hybridized as well, okay? This has been a thing down here for the longest time. Hybridization. It's been a thing down here on planet Earth. Do not kid yourself. But the third school has gotten really, really efficient now. Really, like, scary efficient. I started thinking about this about a week ago. I don't know how it popped into my mind. Quite frankly, I don't know how anything pops into my mind. It's just 1 minute something's not there, the next minute it's there. And why am I thinking about that? I don't even know. I don't even care. It's just there. It's like weather. I don't control the rain. It just is. I don't control my thoughts. Except to stop thinking, or I don't control what comes into my consciousness. I started thinking about this, and I started thinking about all of this new age stuff and everything, and, the Gaia Network, and my experiences with that fat fuck from Cincinnati, who I'll leave unnamed. And it occurred to me that a significant portion of the new spiritual direction on this path, the new spiritual voices on this path, are government-created consciousness. I would say 70-80% of the people who present on the Gaia Network are all, in some way, shape, or form, products of these various systems. Technology and consciousness. And this can be something as innocuous as the hemispheric synchronization of the Monroe Institute. It's government consciousness, right? And I suppose, there's nothing wrong with it. Like, I'm not judging. But I will say this, it's kind of like Obama being a fag and his old lady being his old man. I'm not judging, but why do you got to lie about it, is my question. If this is good for us, why are you lying about it? Why lie about it? If you can genuinely produce spiritual consciousness, then why lie about it? Why sneak it in sideways? Why lie about somebody's background? Why create a false narrative? Why do that? Because it's not good for us, that's why. Plain and simple. It is not good for us at all. Okay? So the third school is what's going to produce the Antichrist. I have some listeners, they send me these long, angry emails telling me that Christ never existed and this and that, and it definitely existed. The narrative has been altered and changed, and I doubt he was crucified, but he definitely existed. It's just asinine to say he didn't exist. And he was probably the most potent of all the spiritual figures, or all the figures in the Abrahamic system. Christ was certainly the most potent, most effective, and the most effectual, and the most in alignment with universal or global spirituality when you look at the East and the West. And I like the message of unconditional love. That one just rings true for me. I've always liked that message. Very difficult to live up to unconditional love. Very difficult. I can barely do it with my own brothers-in-law sometimes, let alone the whole world. It is the most difficult mandate on the planet. But I fear it's true. I believe it's true. That we're all unified at a certain level. We're all one thing, or not. We don't lose our individuality, but we're all atoms in the same body. We're all cells in the same body. We're all drops in the same ocean. I do believe that, yeah. And Christ seemed a pretty good spokesperson for that. So he definitely existed, and anyone who says he didn't is just being asinine. Now, whether he was the fulfillment of the Jewish definition of the Messiah or not, I don't know, and I don't care. I'm not Jewish. And I don't think you should have an opinion about it if you're not Jewish. It's their system. They created it. They invented the word Messiah. Why are you fucking arguing with them? You know, find something else to invest your spiritual efforts in. Right? Let me take a look at Meher Baba. You know, or something like that. But, you know, if anyone's going to know what the Messiah is, it's the rabbis. It's their word. It's their culture. It's their system. I don't know why people get their knots in such a their shorts in such a knot about this. Okay? Well, actually, I do. They do, because there's not enough spiritual practice and development in the Abrahamic systems. It's all like a life insurance, an afterlife insurance contract, and everybody's arguing with their agent, you know. It's like health insurance in the United States. Hey, I pay good money for this. I'm supposed to be covered, you know, and your rep saying, well, no, you got to leave the hospital after 3 days. I'm not ready to go home. Well, that's all the coverage we have for you. It's the Abrahamic system in a nutshell. In fact, many aspects of Western society are a reflection of the deficiencies, deformities, and perversions in our religious and spiritual thinking. The more you look at it, it's just right there in front of you. But hands down, the most dangerous thing in front of us now is the third school. And the third school will produce the Antichrist, which is not a religious concept, because most of the scripture written in the last 2,000 years is, I hate to tell you folks, is complete bullshit. Maybe the Gospels are good, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but everything else is just batshit fucking crazy. And that's especially true of the book of Revelation. Especially true. Okay? So the Antichrist will come out of this third school. It'll be like the super soldier's super soldier. And the mission of that dim-witted fuck will be to wow people with transformative abilities. Magic to the 10th power. And a lot of simple-minded people will believe this person. The key indicator is the heart. You know, what do they say about the heart? What do you feel? That's what really matters in these systems. It's what you feel, not what they say or any of that shit. So the third school is the school that is going to be the most important in the next 10 years. And they've, like I said, they've already produced many figures that are out there now acting as spiritual guides and instructors in this bullshit New Age system. A bastardized Western yoga system. And they're all products of MK Ultra. They're all super psychic. Psychic is not good, by the way. It's anti-spiritual. Right? Never trust anyone you meet who's psychic. They're all fucking retards. All of them. Anyways. Nice to get back in front of the mic and do a podcast. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Talamanca Review. And as I said at the beginning, this podcast is called The Third School. Peace out.